good everyone? Today we're gonna learn about MLS. This video is a beginner's guide to MLS, Major League Soccer. You know, being from Europe, I'm used to that when the first team is on top of the league, is gonna win the league. But apparently in America, it works totally different. So let's just learn something new, shall we?
States of America. A bastardization of American sporting concepts with the world's game that's even present in the name. For those outside of the United States, those customs are foreign. That's probably why you're here. But at the end of this video, you'll have a grasp of all of those funny little rules, at least conversationally. You need a doctorate, actually, to understand the MLS rules in excruciating detail. I mean, how can a league sign Lionel Messi, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Wayne Rooney, but also have a draft, a salary cap, and most of the clubs in it were founded after I was born? And a disclaimer about my birth here. I am, if it wasn't obvious, American. I was raised calling it soccer. I didn't know anybody called it anything else until I was 14 or so. I had to teach my dad the offside rule. My grandpa, who I can have hours-long conversations about the finer points and details of baseball or American football, calls me on the phone to ask who the best player on the US national team is like the day before the World Cup starts. And that's not because there's a debate, it's because he doesn't know anybody on it. And that's important because my family is painfully American when it comes to the soccer experience, and MLS reflects that. The internet and globalized culture introduced myself and my generation in the United States to soccer football in a way that the older generations could never dream. A lot of us got really into it. Some of us even
that game was
the
Pro Evolution Soccer, wasn't a Football Manager. I never really liked the Football Manager, those type of games that you have to prepare, you know, your team, you have to buy players, you have to prepare all the tactics, the strategy, you have to interact with the players. I've always been one guy that just likes to play, you know, pick up his controller and play. Never do any of that, so I always suck. I tried it, but I always sucked.
On that note, I'd like to point out today's jersey sponsor, Sangalo, who make very hard to find and incredibly awesome kits like this Paro FC kit from Bhutan, easily accessible as a service not only to help bolster the merchandising of the clubs that it's providing, but also give soccer heads like me, or football heads or soccer heads like you, I don't know where you're from, the access to just amazing kits. So if you want something like Paro FC or maybe this amazing Highlanders FC kit from Zimbabwe, then check out the Sangalo link in the description.
The hell?
Run it are
that
fantastic,
is so cool.
And we appreciate them being a sponsor of everything we do here. They're also the reason I have so many awesome obscure kits. But playing the FIFA video game and buying cool shirts aren't the only things you need to understand why MLS is MLS. To do that, you have to start with the actual league structure. Now for this, we turn to this article in The Athletic. In it, they do a good job of pointing out that owners in the MLS aren't actually owners. They literally say owners isn't even the proper term for them. In official MLS parlance, they're known as investor operators. Why? Because when somebody buys a club in MLS, a la David Beckham buying a club in Miami, they don't actually own the club. MLS is one big corporation that owns every player in every club within it, and the owners are basically shareholders that are put in charge of their own little kingdoms. This isn't just different than ownership models in the rest of the world, where you basically either have fan-owned clubs or some dude with a ton of money owns everything about the club. This is alien, and there is a reason MLS runs this way. Because when it was founded, the landscape of soccer football in the United States was completely different than it is now. The precursor to MLS was the NASL, the North American Soccer League, and it came into existence in 1968.
Wait, what? This is so confusing. How can you play soccer on the football field? That is so confusing.
NASL, the North American Soccer League, and it came into existence in 1968.
Got a headache by the end of the game.
National top league in the U.S. It exploded in popularity in 1975 when Pele signed for the New York Cosmos, and other owners and other clubs tried to follow this model by also signing stars. So there was a huge influx of star power. Anybody from Johan Cruyff to Franz Beckenbauer, they all came to the United States. This resulted to the same issue that ended up bringing down the
That's crazy. I didn't know about Beckenbauer, but they were rest in peace. He just died a couple of days ago.
Chinese Super League, which was reckless spending and basically the earning power of clubs depending on them being a traveling circus. And don't take my word for it, you don't have to, because those are the words of Philadelphia Union head coach Jim Curtin when he talked about this 2 years ago with CNBC.
There weren't the soccer-specific stadiums that there are now, and it was kind of like a traveling circus almost, and it was a little bit out of control.
Now, the traveling circus was usually the New York Cosmos themselves, who sold over 70,000 tickets for their home games for people to come watch Pelé and Beckenbauer, and obviously other teams not in New York couldn't match that level of spending. This is detailed incredibly well in an article by the LA Times in 1994 that came out as MLS was just starting up as a requiem on the NASL. The article lays it out, says owners tried to keep up with the Cosmos and they didn't have the resources to do it, the league didn't support them, and one by one, team after team burned itself out. Teams would overspend and then fold, or even worse, have owners that didn't really care. Once they saw they were losing money, they were out. Mark Brickley, the VP of Public Relations for the Cosmos, said that the issue was the owners. We made some critical mistakes, chief among them expanding from 12 to 24 teams without researching and carefully planning the ownership groups. The questionable ownership choices meant the NASL ballooned quickly up to 24 teams, and by the time it ended in 1985, there were only two teams, that were willing to keep playing. That's why the league folded.
What the
NASL
hell?
star burned bright, but it burned
What
fast.
was that?
MLS was designed specifically to combat that experience. That's why all the rules are so freaking complicated. And that's why there's collective ownership. It's really hard to take your club away and just fold it as an entity when you don't actually own the specific club. As for MLS, after the 1994 World Cup in the United States, part of which the US had to promise to build a top league, MLS kicked off in 1996.
And we are underway. Major League Soccer has begun.
It kicked off with 10 teams from LA all the way to DC, and it was not glamorous at all. And that wasn't just because of a lack of interest in the US public, it's because the league was absolutely dedicated to the idea of controlled spending and competitive balance. You might have heard me mention this earlier, but from the onset, player contracts were owned by the league themselves. Tab Ramos, the first signing in league history, was signed by the league and then assigned to the New York Metro Stars. Like, the league signed him and then just said, you're going there because we think it's the best move. Despite this unique contract structure, the league was able to lure a couple of big names from the World Cup team like Lawless and Eric Winalda, but that created a first season bump in attendance and interest that didn't really last. And this was made a lot worse by the fact that teams played in these cavernous NFL stadiums of 50 to 80,000 seats. You see, MLS had learned a lot of lessons from NASL, but it hadn't learned all of them. I mean, their initial reaction to try and attract fans was to try and add things that American fans would ideally be more familiar with. Like in tied games, there would be a shootout to try and determine the winner. And instead of a 90-minute clock counting,
I do remember that. I do remember that.
Zero. But once they realized
they would do it in Europe as well.
Alienated people.
Why is it not stopping this thing? Come on. They were doing in Europe as well, that thing about the shootout penalties. It wasn't that good. It wasn't that good. Let's be fair.
He liked soccer, football, and didn't bring in anybody new. These were gone by 1999. In a bit of a desperate bid, just like the NASL, the MLS thought that its future and success might come from expansion. In 1998, it added a team in Miami and Chicago. But even with additions and tight financial controls, the league reached the brink in 2001, just 5 years after it was founded and 6 years before David Beckham arrived. And the reason it was going to fold is the losses were terrible. In the first 5 years of the league's existence, it lost $250 million. $250 million. Don Garber was brought in 1999 as the league commissioner because they fired the last guy after only 3 years. Despite that change, by 2001, the league was fully prepared and planning on folding. If it wasn't for a few individuals, it would have folded. The main one being Philip Anschutz, the owner of the LA Galaxy. Commissioner Commissioner Don Garber would go on to say in 2006, with no Phil Anschutz, there's no MLS today. That's because at various points of the 10 founding teams in MLS, he owned 7 of them, most of them at the same time, taking on massive losses in order to keep the league afloat. He sold his stake in all those teams and I would hope got all of his money back, but for his incredible decision to take on essentially the whole debt of MLS at the time, he is one of only 4 recipients of the Medal of Honor in US soccer. Even with Anschutz and others stepping up, in 2002, MLS contracted from 12 to 10 teams. They dumped the team in Miami that had just started, and one of the founding members, the Tampa Bay Mutiny. Which, on a side note, I actually went to Mutiny games when I was a little kid. My dad thought it was cool. If I can find a picture of me at a Mutiny game, I'll put it up on Instagram when this video comes out. So check out the Instagram for a 4-year-old Zealand at a Tampa Mutiny game. I remember it being very fun. Had no idea I'd end up here in life, but bring back the mutiny. But this is where our story starts to turn, in the David Beckham direction and in the weird, fancy designated player direction. Because even though it was a dire situation, MLS was putting things in place to succeed. In 1999, Columbus completed the first soccer-specific stadium in MLS. And this might sound foreign to the rest of the world, but in the United States, we have a lot of stadiums for a lot of things. But having stadiums that are built specifically for a soccer field, a pitch, to be on them creates a much better atmosphere and is hugely important. So important that MLS now requires all new teams to have a soccer-specific stadium built when they join the league. But even when that momentum was building, when you're in the right position, you need somebody to light the match. And that happened at the 2002 World Cup. The United States cranked out a stunning run to the quarterfinals in the South Korea-Japan World Cup. And while that might sound foreign to people outside the US, the biggest event on the soccer footballing calendar in the US, the only event that gets above the fold headline coverage wall to wall for people that don't even care about soccer, is the World Cup. The US making the quarterfinal was a huge deal. How huge? Over 61,000 people attended the 2002 MLS Cup final. Remember, at the beginning of the same year, the league folded 2 teams. By 2005, stadiums were being built, finances were stabilizing, and young American players were starting to get purchased, like Tim Howard going to United for $4 million. And this is when MLS, from 10 teams, started to expand once again. It added Real Salt Lake in 2005, as well as Chivas USA, but that was folded down the line because of lack of attendance. Houston Dynamo joined the following year by stealing San Jose's team, and then San Jose got a new team. It's always weird. But the point is, MLS felt comfortable enough to expand again multiple times, and then it got the ultimate match, the bomb. And our Oppenheimer in this case was David Beckham in 2007. And what enabled that to happen is MLS finally broke from its tightly controlled salary regulations and created something called the designated player. It's colloquially known as the David Beckham rule. A designated player is somebody that only counts as $400,000 against your salary cap of, at that time, $2.1 million, and you can pay him a lot more than $400,000. It just has to come out of your owner's pocket. And so David Beckham got paid a massive...
Yeah, I remember Jovinko. It was really... I still remember Jovinko when he was playing Juventus. He was really, really good, but it was too little. I think it was like... oh, wait. Fuck, I don't know how to say it in American numbers. Ah, fuck. Oh my god. 5'6", probably, or 5 foot. Yeah, 5'6". I think it's about 166 or 165 centimeters, something like that. And it was too skinny, so... I mean, if you watch European football, of course, they are all fucking huge. I mean, I'm 5'10", and I will be like a dwarf compared to all the guys that play football in Europe, because they're all so freaking tall. They're all like 6 feet, and then they're huge with big muscles, big chest, so... You cannot do anything if you are too small, you know? But when he went to play for Toronto, it was like one of the best. I think he even win awards when he was playing the MLS, if I'm not mistaken. It was really, really, really good.
bag to come to LA. And this was obviously a delicate balance, but a huge success. By 2010, MLS added a second designated player spot. You could even pay extra money to the league to get a third designated player spot. Now there's a rule that if a player is under 23, you don't even have to buy that third designated player spot. They just get it for free. Like former Barcelona starlet Ricky Puig. That's how he ended up in LA. He is a third designated player that you don't have to pay for. Well, you have to pay his wage. You don't have to pay for the extra spot. You get it. And that's it. Just 3 players. Now, if you sell a player like Alphonso Davies to Bayern Munich, for example, you can use a part of that money from the sale to pay players' wages down to reduce their impact on the salary cap. But outside of those 3 guys, everybody else has to be within it. Now, this runs directly in the face of the idea of the MLS being a retirement league, because MLS is actually terrified of designated players because of what happened to the NASL. Now, obviously, David Beckham was a genius move, but you could just have easily have gotten Andrea Pirlo, who came to NYCFC and just didn't do anything. And you get enough Andrea Pirlos, then you sink your entire league like the NASL. And now that the
I don't know, I didn't know, yeah, I remember that he went away, but I don't know what he did.
Controlled salaries has led all of the clubs to focus on developing young talent because you just don't have to pay them as much. And this was a key cornerstone of MLS when it was created. The U.S. national team coach back in 1982 said the NASL contributed no foundation to his team when the team failed to make the World Cup. MLS wanted to make sure that never happened again, which outside of a really terrible night in Trinidad and Tobago has been true. But the World Cup boom and the David Beckham boom finally gave MLS the tools to do what it always wanted to do, which was expand. With a capital expand. You ready for this? Because it hits fast. Same year David Beckham signed, Toronto FC was added to MLS. In 2008, San Jose's team returned after being moved to Houston. In 2009, Seattle Sounders started. In 2010, it was the Philadelphia Union. In 2011, it was Vancouver Whitecaps and the Portland Timbers. In 2012, it was Montreal Impact, who are now Montreal CF. Huge break until 2015 when NYCFC and Orlando City were added. 2017 was Atlanta United and Minnesota United. 2018 was LAFC. 2019, Cincinnati. 2020 would be Inter Miami. Oh, also Nashville. 2021, Austin FC. 2022, Charlotte FC. And 2023, St. Louis. But also 2025 will be a San Diego team. From 2015 to now,
crazy.
11 teams have been added to MLS, including Miami, Inter Miami, where Messi is right now. And when San Diego joins, MLS will be at 30 teams, which is comparable with every other major sports league in the United States. The value of MLS and the value of these individual clubs, it's all been skyrocketing. Remember that massive debt MLS had like first 5 years? Well, now the San Diego club cost $500 million to buy into. And why is this all possible? Controlled financial projections and hugely intense ownership vetting processes. And it feels like MLS is positioning itself well again. And that's because soccer is booming in the United States. In that CNBC story we referenced earlier from a couple of years ago, there's a Gallup poll that shows that in Gen Z, soccer's the second most popular sport in the US, tied with basketball. The same report says that in the generation after Gen Z, Gen Alpha, it's the most popular sport. But, huge but, soccer popularity does not equal MLS popularity, and that is a gap MLS is trying to close. Let me lay it out for you. You're a soccer fan in the United States. You love to foot some balls, right? Wait. You have a team in your city, you probably go and support that team. If you don't, you're probably just watching the Prem. The largest audience for a regular season match last year on ESPN for MLS was 591,000. The average NFL audience is 10 times that size. Now, if you ask The Athletic, that's because of crippling parity, where 8 different teams have won the title in the last 10 years, where teams change an average of 6 spots in the standings based off of one season. That creates the idea that it is so balanced and there's so much chaos and parity that you can't get invested in storylines. This is, of course, heightened by the playoff system. MLS is split into 2 conferences, East and West, and about half the teams in those conferences will make it to the playoffs every year. The playoffs are a brief cup-like tournament to determine the winner. The final is a single leg. It's a big event like the Super Bowl. But as I've covered, it doesn't get near as much TV.
Makes sense. It makes sense because it would be like too crazy to like fly from. I mean, it's not like in Italy that. I mean, yeah, in minor leagues as well in Italy, there's like one league to the north, the other league to the center, and the other league in the south of Italy. Because of course the budget will be too limited. It will be too crazy. I mean, especially in America, if you go from New York to LA, it's gonna be probably like 5 or 6 hours flight, no? I mean, when they do play the Champions League games, the furthest they will go, maybe from here, will be like, I don't know, to Russia, to Turkey or whatever, and that's like 2 or 3 hours tops flight. So it's still doable, but if you have always to do like a huge flight, it will be like too crazy, I would guess. So yeah, it makes sense, Eastern and Western. That's pretty cool though.
Viewership. Whatever the cause, the lack of national interest in the league as a whole has held MLS back from capturing a lot of the headlines, despite a ton of passion for the sport and deep local interest in a lot of the clubs. That was until Lionel Messi, who very well may be the second boom. If we look at the secret to MLS success, it was a successful World Cup and then David Beckham. Well, now there's Lionel Messi and a home World Cup in 2026, with a national team that is, even in the idea of pessimists,
My God,
MLS might
he's the best.
be in the position to move from thriving local
I'm a
success
Juventus fan, so I love
mainstream
McKennie, of
national.
course.
And the last part of that positioning is right before Lionel Messi came over, MLS did something insane. It signed over all of its media rights, everywhere, in every country in the world, to Apple TV. It uncomplicates a notoriously complicated process. No other league in the world had ever done this. That's not the first time MLS has done something no one else has done. So maybe that now you understand allocated money and salary caps, you can catch a game, no matter where you are in the world, in the same place. And like this whole grand experiment, time will tell if it was the right decision. As with every video we do, all the research is down in the description for your perusal, including that excellent piece by CNBC. If you enjoyed the video, we'd of course appreciate you subscribing, and if you want to keep
amazing.
on
I will do
binge-watching
it.
videos, this is about the tough history of Inter Miami before Lionel Messi got there. It was not a fun ride.
Oh, we need to check that out as well, huh? We definitely need to check out more videos about MLS. I didn't know any of the stuff that we just learned together, so it was really, really cool. Let me know down in the comments what do you think about, I mean, maybe 10 years from now. How would it rank MLS in the whole panorama of football around the world, or soccer, however you want to call it? I think it would be pretty good, right? I mean, it would be more interesting probably than most European soccer leagues. Like, for example, back in the days, Serie A used to be the most interesting in the whole world. Now it's just, I don't know. I just watch it because I'm Italian and I love Juventus, so I cannot spend a weekend without seeing my favorite team. But still, it's not that good. It's not as good as Premier League. That's for sure. That's for sure. Or it's not. I don't know. There's so many better leagues, unfortunately. So yeah, maybe MLS could be quite a change. I mean, I don't understand anything about NFL, but sometimes I will still watch highlights or some games. Not the whole game because I don't understand anything and it's too long. But still, I will watch sometimes the highlights and it's pretty cool. So maybe MLS will be my favorite league from now on. I don't know. We'll see. We shall live and then we will see. That's it from Philosopher Mauro. I'll see you next time.